All right, so today we have Pat Girondi. Pat, brief introduction, singer-songwriter, author, former commodities trader, once America's 25 most eligible bachelor, most eligible bachelor in Playgirl magazine, now the founder of San Rocco Therapeutics, taking on the fight against rare disease, and most importantly, family. I wanted to have you on here today because obviously I've known a lot about this, and I think this is important for the general public to know, and I want you to share your story. So if you can start and kind of tell us a little bit about what San Rocco Therapeutics is and how it got started.
Yeah, so I'm from the south side of Chicago and lived the American dream. As you said, I was a trader in Playgirl magazine and one of America's most eligible bachelors with Sylvester Stallone and Magic Johnson. Life changed when my son was diagnosed with a rare blood disease called thalassemia. Thalassemia is a cousin disease to sickle cell anemia. And I say a cousin because they're both created by defects on the beta globin gene, which is the adult hemoglobin gene. Both are orphan diseases. Orphan diseases in the United States means that the disease afflicts less than 200,000 people. Sickle cell disease affects about 100,000 patients in the United States, and thalassemia about 1,200. So when my son was diagnosed in 92 October, so actually we're celebrating 33 years, they told me he wouldn't make it to be a teenager. And at that time, that's exactly what was going on. The only cure was a bone marrow transplant, but very few people realize that less than 25% of the people on the planet have someone who could actually safely give them, be donors for a bone marrow transplant. So we didn't have a candidate. No one in the family, no one in the banks were compatible. And we pursued experimental medicine because in the early 90s, you didn't want to transfuse, which is basically what these patients do, transfuse. And so we discovered a medicine that stimulated fetal hemoglobin, and it was crazy. It cost $70,000 for 40 days in the United States. And so my family forever moved to Europe, and I opened up a medical center in a small town about 20 miles from my grandparents' town in Italy. And that's where we basically live today. And then I founded back then San Rocco Therapeutics. In 1995, I met John Walton from Walmart, Sam's son John, because their son Lucas had a very rare disease called Wilms tumor. The product that my son was using had an application for Wilms tumor, and I was partners with John for 9 years. Great family, Christy, John. Christy's still involved with the company. And John unfortunately died in a plane crash around 2005. And we just continued to move on. In 2007, we were instrumental in getting the mobilization of CD34 cells and stem cells approved. And 2010, we delivered the world's first batch of commercial vector. These patients are treated by using the disabled HIV virus loaded up with a gene. And there are thousands of diseases which will be cured eventually by gene therapy.
So there was a lot of big words used there for me, and a lot of different diseases, a lot of different, instruments you had brought up. Why is it take someone like you to be the leader of this?
Well, because I had skin in the game. So obviously I wouldn't have had anything to do with this if my son hadn't been diagnosed. And I use the words, like you said, these big words, thalassemia, and stem cell therapy, etc. I didn't graduate from high school. I mean, these words were really interesting things to digest. And back in the 90s, when this happened, we really didn't have internet. And my friends would go to the University of Chicago or St. Luke's in Chicago, and they would make photocopies of articles and send me literally miles of faxes. So I bought every book that I could read about the rare diseases, and particularly hematological blood diseases. I got in touch with so many different people in the area. But, you know, me, like any parent, I'm no different than anyone else. You're going to do the best you can. I was fortunate that I had economic power, that I could basically put my money where my mouth was, where, or, you know, a lot of people, they don't have that luck that I did.
Can we talk about what it's like, or what it was like for Rocco to go through his disease, and kind of where it started and kind of where it is now? That, you know, if he was only supposed to make it till a teenager, and he's 33 now.
Yeah, right. So kids, you know, when they're born with these things, and a lot of parents who are listening, if, you know, they know that if their child is born with these kind of advantages, you know, some people call them disadvantages, but more times than not, they end up being advantages. But they know how to deal with it, and Rocco always dealt without a problem. I mean, he's gone through different operations and transfuses once every 18 to 20 days. The wonderful thing about Rocco is he never once ever complained, never ever said, why me? Nothing like that. So we're very lucky, because not every patient is different. But for Rocco, he just grew up a normal young man, of course, like I said, in Italy. You know, it's almost like he never knew he had a problem. And I often say that a person with thalassemia is called a thalassemic. And I often say that my son is not a thalassemic. He's just someone with thalassemia.
What is that?
Thalassemia is a rare blood disease that affects the adult hemoglobin. So when we're about a year and a half, our fetal hemoglobin that we have when our mother's stomach turns off, and the adult hemoglobin turns on. So for sickle cell disease and thalassemic patients, the adult hemoglobin is defective.
Okay. And what do they have to do?
So every patient is different, obviously, but my son has to transfuse every 18 to 20 days. And then with the transfusions, other than come viruses, also comes an overload of iron. And my son has to use iron chelators. When he was young, he had to have a pump hooked up to him about 14 to 16 hours a day to get that excess iron out. Today they have pills that do that. So he takes his iron chelator pill, he transfuses, and then of course there's different things that come in for every patient's different, osteoporosis, and some patients get hepatitis, and it's just different for everyone.
Mm-hmm. So this didn't start out as San Rocco.
No, I mean, initially, I think the first company was called Emerging Pharmaceutical Technologies, and we were making the experimental product that my son was on in Jamaica, actually, and distributing it to the world. And then it became Beacon when we joined forces with the Walton family in 1995. When the Walton family basically Lucas, their son, was cured and no problem, let's put it that way. We took the company over, and in 1995 to 2004, the Walton family was responsible for lifting the heaviest weight economically, etc. In 2005, that switched to us, and it became Air and Gene Therapeutics. Air and Gene Therapeutics teamed up with a large medical center in New York, and then pushed the product to, like I said, we delivered the world's first batch of gene therapy for sickle cell disease or thalassemia, because up until the time, 2010, when we delivered the product, it cost $1 million per patient, took 18 months per patient. Instead, for $1.3 million, we made enough medicine for roughly 10 patients, which meant $130,000 a patient. We ended up having issues, legal issues, because once Big Pharma, if you want to call it Big Pharma.
What would you call it?
Well, so in 1730, over 50% of people died by the time they were 30. By 1830, 50% of the people died by the time they were 35. By 2030, 50% of the people will still be alive at 65. So in 100 years, you did 5 years, and then in 200 years, you did basically 30 years. So longevity jumped, and our lifestyles have been enhanced. So I don't think it's fair to blanketly criticize pharma, because without them, we'd probably still only be living till, we were 40 years old or whatever. So we have a big debt to the people who have dedicated their lives to science and to medicine. Today we throw around the phrase big pharma, and that's not even very efficient, because there are some wonderful pharmaceutical companies, and there are some wonderful leaders in the pharmaceutical industry, in the drug industry. And then there are some that aren't so wonderful. And I guess you can say that about anything. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest problems, I think, in pharmaceutical business is that it costs money to do research. And if you don't have the funds, you can't do the research. So you have to raise money. And to raise the money, you need bankers. So it's kind of an odd marriage when you have a scientist whose vocation is to cure disease, and he has to get married to a banker, who we all know that, a banker's business is finance. And it makes for a very kind of like the old film, The Odd Couple, Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon. A lot of people won't remember that, but it's a great film. And you basically have that. So you have this scientist, and he's got to live with the banker. So it creates a lot of interesting situations. And I've met some wonderful, wonderful people in the business, in the pharmaceutical industry. Of course, I've met some people who, aren't so wonderful. And I'm sure that there are people in the industry that will say the same thing about me, so that I'm not so wonderful, or I'm not so smart, or I'm not so good, and that's okay. But I think that the job of your podcast is to reach out to people who can be, and will be, by the way, affected with illness, whether it's cancer, or it's heart disease, or it's a rare disease. And I think the real thing that we could do to help those people, because we both agree of course, we've known each other for a long time, and our families have been. I mean, I sent a picture of your wife's great-grandfather and me together. He made me the youngest member of the Valentine's Boys Club way back in, I don't remember, it might have been 1970s. So our families go way back, and the passion to do good for others is something that is there as Catholics, as Americans. So when someone gets cancer, heart disease, high blood pressure, whatever it is, I think the first thing is to remember is there's an old saying that if you're not your own doctor, you're a bad patient. Now, of course, when the child is 5 years old or 10 or 3, he can't be or she can't be her own doctor. So that makes the parents the doctor. And the first thing that I'll say to anyone affected by disease, and every single one of our families are affected by this, is to stop and to think it through. Think everything through. Don't underestimate yourself. I consider myself one of the dumber human beings that I know. And as limited as I am, there were many things that I was able to do. And that's the case for everyone. If you're lazy, maybe that could be better. I always say I'm lazy. That's why I get things done quickly, because I don't want to have to work. But you have to sit back and think. And today we have incredible tools. A lot of people dislike technology. But technology is a wonderful gift to all of us. And today, with artificial intelligence, this morning, I work out every morning when I'm in the United States with Mr. Arcieri. He's 87. 20 years ago, he taught me how to do my workout routine that I do every day to this day. And he was telling me that when he's eating, he's having trouble with his stomach, etc. And I sat there for 20 minutes or 15 minutes, and we went through artificial intelligence. He gave me his symptoms, showed me where it was going on, all of that. So my first thing is that whenever anything happens, use that artificial intelligence. And the second thing that we have, there's a website called pubmed.gov. And literally every single medical publication is there. And it's computerized chronologically, and you can go in there and pick out whatever the disease is. And it could be heart disease, it could be high blood pressure, whatever it is. And it will lead you to articles on your specific situation. And that's the first thing that you should do. I mean, if it's an emergency, you need to call an ambulance. I get it. But take the time, and could take it 2 hours or 5 hours, or for me, 33 years. Take the time to think about things and to use the artificial intelligence and to use pubmed.gov. That's the first thing that I would do. For anyone, I would tell them to do that. And the other thing, I think my advice to people is to be patient with your doctor. Somehow, some way, doctors have, been put on the altar in a certain sense, or we honor them. We believe they're more intelligent than we are. We believe they're more knowledgeable than we are, etc. And give them a break. They're not necessarily more intelligent than you are. They're just human beings like we are, like you are, like a truck driver, or the guy that picks up your garbage. They just studied. And they don't know. They can only help you based on their own experience and the books that they've read. So give them a break.
Going back to the start of that, most families in any emergency situation, whether it's with their home or health, kind of freak out and don't know what to do. When you got your news, what about Rocco? Would you handle it differently than you handled it today? Or handled it then?
Yeah. I mean, when it happened, it came out of nowhere. I actually was in Germany when I received the call. Rocco was 2.5 years old. And it was kind of interesting. Now, I was lucky because when I was young, very young, 7, 8 years old, I shoe shined on 51st Street, 47th Street. And I had such a variable life, lived in a lot of different houses and neighborhoods with different people as well. So I was very lucky. So I was very flexible. So when it happened, of course I was kind of shocked. But I didn't spend a lot of time saying, why did it happen? Or what did I do? Or I just said, okay, what do I have to do? And it appeared obvious that if the doctors told me that there was no cure, that I had to find a cure. What I would do differently today is that I would have used these tools that we have that we didn't have back then. We didn't have artificial intelligence. We barely had internet back then. And I didn't find out about PubMed.gov for probably 6 or 7 years or 8 years. So that's the only thing I would have done differently. I think I would have had a little bit more technology at my side. But, the most powerful thing in research, any kind of research, by the way, I believe in our life is, love that we have for one another. It's obvious that parents love their children, but in time, I've seen so many people with rare diseases. There's the Van Houten family. He lost 2 children to Batten's disease, very close friends of mine. And I've seen people go through horrific things that I didn't have to go through, and I'm much more fortunate. And in the end, I really feel that all of these people are family members. That's the only way I know how to describe it, because I feel very close to them. I feel responsible for them. And I often say that, I'm looking forward to curing not only Rocco, but all of his brothers and sisters with sickle cell disease and thalassemia who, have connected us into this one big family. So technology is really on our side today. So a parent who gets shocked by whatever it is really a lot more fortunate than we used to be. And you just have to be patient and let that love be constructive in your body, in your mind, in your family. Don't let it rip the family apart. There's the old saying about sickness in families that when you get a sick child, it will either bond the family together or rip it apart. Make sure you do everything that you can do to make it bond. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any magic wand, but my advice is just when something like this happens, to slow down, think about it. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I still today, yesterday I was on the phone with Vinay Prasad. Vinay Prasad is the head of CBER now at FDA. He's the guy you hired, fired, and came back, for example, And I don't have a problem picking up the phone and talking to people and asking them for help. And there are a lot of great people, and most people are great people, and they will help you.
how did you start a pharmaceutical company? So when you tell people that, they're like, it doesn't seem possible. I couldn't do it.
Yeah. Well, if I could do it, like I said, I'm not too bright. If I could do it, anybody could do it. So for me, it was easy because my son was on arginine butyrate, and because the professor, Dr. Perrine, who was treating patients with arginine butyrate, couldn't make it any longer at the hospital where she was at. She was at Children's Hospital Oakland Research Institute. And because the volumes were so high, the insurance wouldn't cover it. So I had to start making it in Jamaica. And I didn't have a choice. My son, wouldn't have been able to do the medicine. So I had to start making it. I was lucky enough. I ran into a wonderful couple, Hayhurst, Walter and Sandy. And Walter was a pharmacist, a compounding pharmacist. And they helped me. And that was it. And then Sandy grew up with Alice Walton in Little Rock. I think it's Little Rock. Anyway, with Alice Walton in Arkansas. And they found out that we had this product that could help the nephew, Alice's nephew, Lucas. And there we are.
Wow. And let's talk about where San Rocco is today. Not to fast forward through some things, but where's San Rocco today? And where do you see it in 6 months?
So, like I said, San Rocco was a pioneer in gene therapy, in a lot of ways saved gene therapy in 2005. We went through, unfortunately, about 14 years of legal battles because a company called Bluebird Bio sabotaged the product. Bluebird Bio is run by a banker named Nick Leshley.
Why did they want to sabotage it?
Because they wanted me to basically sell them my product because they had bought for $35 million a bad product from France, and they wanted me to sell them my product. And I told them I wouldn't sell it unless they promised to use my product because they, in fact, bought a bad product from France. They didn't like to hear that, and so they basically sabotaged my product. I didn't realize what was going on until 2018, basically, when I was allowed to read the discovery of the court case. And it was all very sad. A very dishonest banker, Nick Leshley. We have all the emails. He, of course, made about $130 million through all of this. I brought all of this to the attention of Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, who had decided that she wasn't going to pursue this, unfortunately. I first reached out to her in 2019, and they didn't pursue it, unfortunately, which even cost us more years. But today, Bluebird Bio bankrupted. They had a market cap of $11.8 billion. They raised $4.2 billion in the marketplace. And these kind of people should be stopped because people invest in America because they have faith in American companies. They have faith in the American system. And when you have people like Nick Leshley, Third Rock Ventures, who basically raised $4.2 billion from people, hardworking, investing their money, and they run it into a pyramid scheme. The stock got up to $230 in 2017. Like I said, they had a market cap of $11.8 billion. It was all built on a bad product. We have all the emails that say that our product is 3 to 5 times better than theirs. Of course, we didn't get these until 2018. They were doing all of these wonderful things in 2010 and 2011. But we're over that. And I don't have a problem with Bluebird Bio. Well, they don't exist anymore, or Nick Leshley or anyone. I pray for them. I wish them well. They made tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, Third Rock Venture and Nick Leshley. They did that by sabotaging our product. They cost the lives of thousands of patients. I'm sure they didn't realize that they were costing the lives of patients when they're doing that, but greed sometimes can blind us. But the silver lining to all of that is that we were forced to go back to the drawing board after we settled in court. I found two wonderful researchers, Frank Park at the University of Tennessee, Andrew Wilbur at Southern Illinois University, John Tisdale, National Institute of Health, Franco Locatelli, Aurelio Maggio in Italy. But we found some wonderful scientists, people with vocation. And our product is 30% better than the approved Bluebird product. Now, Bluebird product is called Lyfgenia. It costs $3.1 million per patient. I promised Bobby Kennedy that we wouldn't charge over $1 million per patient for 10 years. And I'll do everything to keep that promise. We believe that the initial price will be around $800,000. That's the price that we can make a safe product, treat the patient, and keep the company going so that we can help other people and do other things.
You said at the beginning that Letitia James didn't want to help.
Well,
why?
Yeah, I'm an author. I've just been asked to write a book about Letitia James, and I actually reached out to her office to see if I could talk to her. I don't know her personally. One of my people met with her. People that work with us met with her. I've met with her representatives 15 times or 10 times. I can't decide why she made the decisions that she did. She made the decision that my case was not worthy of them investigating. Didn't make sense. I was told that they didn't have the resources. Unfortunately, and I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, I really don't care about any of that nonsense. But it was frustrating for me to sit there and watch day in and day out that Trump was on the stand because he supposedly overvalued property. And I mean, okay, if the Attorney General decided that they were going to pursue that, that's obviously not my business. However, by doing that, they made a choice, and they didn't pursue the criminal activity, which literally cost the lives of sickle cell disease and thalassemic patients. Now, no one's perfect, and we all make mistakes. I can't speak for Letitia James, but this is precisely what happened.
What does sickle cell and who does it affect most in thalassemia?
Yeah, so thalassemia affects Arabs and Asians, mostly Arabs, and sickle cell disease affects Africans. So I just got back from Burkina Faso, a small country in Africa, 25 million. And I was asked to go and give counsel for their sickle cell disease programs. I met with 7 ministers, and it was a wonderful trip, by the way. So sickle cell affects Africans, and in the United States we have like 100,000 patients who have sickle cell anemia. Thalassemia affects Mediterranean people for the most part, Moroccans, Tunisians, Algerians, Italians, Greeks.
And you may not have the answer to this, but this is a enticing question that, I talk about every day because I have employees. When you treat somebody, it costs the health insurance companies a lot of money. And if we can cure them and it would cost less money, don't you think they would be behind that? And don't you think there'd be more support?
So the healthcare industry is exactly that. It's an industry. And it's evolved over the years. There's no doubt about it that doctors and scientists want to cure disease. But we said that they're married to bankers. And I'm a Catholic, and I don't want to ever throw the first stone. I'm certainly not perfect. However, I have to admit that I have even heard CEOs of large companies. Once, actually, I was told that I was of inferior intelligence because I was trying to cure disease when all the money is in treating the disease. And that was a CEO of a Fortune 500 company who told me that.
And a lot of these industries, whether it's cancer, sickle cell, there's fundraisers. There's a lot of money raised. And before we started this conversation, we talked about cancer uses the same medication from 60 years ago. And people are working hard every day to raise money for research and to help these families, which I think is great. But also, has there been a change? Where does all that money go to?
Yeah, there has been a change because, like I said, we're living longer than ever. And we can only think thank science for that. Today there's CAR T cell and there's stem cells and there's gene therapy, and that's great. The money, my favorite is St. Jude for whatever reason. Maybe it's the story behind Danny Thomas. Maybe it's because they tend to pay their executives, a lot less than most of these huge medical centers, even nonprofit medical centers. I'm not going to mention names, but there are medical centers, nonprofit medical centers, that are compensating their CEO $6 million, $8 million. And at the same time, when a child can't afford to pay its bill, they have people teaching the parents how to do GoFundMe pages. And that's crazy. It's a sickness we have in the United States, by the way, and I think it's more here than anywhere, even though the multinational corporations are getting it to spread everywhere. But this whole idea that you have to reward the executives, who very often are idiots and don't do anything or do very little, or ruin their companies. Like I said, Bluebird Bio, Nick Leshley was compensated, that we know, over $100 million in Bluebird Bio. Then he did a spin-off, 270 Pharma, or 270, whatever it's called, where he made literally $130 million. All he did was ruin two companies and cost the lives of patients. Well, he was able to do that because he went to Princeton, and I think it was Princeton, and we have this horrible thing. I was watching on the other day, a Senate hearing where, they were asking the CEO of Boeing, I think it was, how much, and he was like $30 million. And this is why this is a worse problem than we realize it is because it makes mediocrity, it turns mediocrity into a virtue. Because you've got this guy at the top, and it could be a nonprofit medical center who pay no taxes on their property, etc. And you're paying the head $6 million. Well, okay. What do you think you got to pay the people that are holding him up? You're paying them $4 million and $3 million. And then what do you think you got to pay the people holding them up? And in the end, you have a board. And often, these board members who are working, if you call it work, an hour, 2 hours a month, are compensated. Bluebird was paying their board members $750,000 a year. Well, if you're making $50,000 a year as a board member, and you see the CEO or you see the company going in the wrong direction, in your opinion, hey, it's okay, I'm going to say something. Worst case scenario, they throw me off the board and I lose $50,000. But when you're paying your board members $750,000, you're basically just paying them to rubber stamp everything you do. So, the people say, well, if you don't pay people a lot of money, you're not going to get good people. It's almost the opposite. When you pay them too much money, you're basically turning mediocrity into the way that company does its business. I mean, what kind of serious company is compensating their leader $20 million? I mean, how is that responsible?
Yeah.
You know, the average family in the United States is still making under $70,000 a year. Mm-hmm. Okay? How do you justify paying somebody 20, 30, 40 times more than that? I mean, are you out of your mind? And that's, you know, the white elephant in the room that nobody talks about. You know, we all want to talk about corruption, and don't get me wrong, the guy that steals the car is corrupt. But we don't talk about some of these guys who are never prosecuted, who actually go on TED, they go on podcasts like the one I'm on, and, you know, they talk about virtue and et cetera. And they're basically, through their salaries and compensations, are robbing their companies, are robbing the patients, and are driving up the cost of healthcare. No one talks about it. Everyone says, well, it's through stock options or it's through selling share. In the end, it's the same thing. Because when those companies get in trouble, like Bluebird Bio got into trouble, it wasn't the CEO said, well, I sold $100 million worth of shares. Now I'm going to put it back in the company and we're going to get the company going strong again. That money's gone forever. It disappears. When those executives stick that money in their pocket, it's not coming back. And in the United States of America, if we have one problem, the biggest problem, that's it. It's these corruptorations. That's what I call them, corruptorations. And they're not all bad. And I don't like to use big pharma because guess what? There are some big pharmaceutical companies that are virtuous and good. But what we need to do is we need to weed out the bad actors. Mm-hmm. And that's not an easy thing to do. But one of the things we have to, you know, start asking ourselves, you know, is does the CEO of Boeing making $30 million, is that okay? Fold in 2008 when Lehman Brothers crashed and went bankrupt and took all of those people's pensions and all of their jobs away. Was it right for Fold to get a parachute of $34 million? Was that right? No, nobody knows that. We all know it's not right.
Right.
So let's start working on that, okay? You're not going to be able to weed out the problem in healthcare unless you start weeding out the bad actors in the pharmaceutical industry and in the medical industry. And like I said, you know, all of these companies, and I'm not allowed to say names by law because I signed contract settlements, which is another joke, but that's the way that it is. But, you know, nonprofit doesn't mean they don't make profit. I mean, literally, you've got nonprofits in the United States where the CEOs are making millions and millions of dollars. And at the same time, they're asking you to donate $10. Put $10 in a cup. Let's have an Easter egg hunt. You know, we can raise $2,000. I mean, it's kind of absurd. It's lopsided.
The general public, somebody like me, what is something we can do to help?
Do your homework. You know, don't be donating money to nonprofits or not-for-profits that are compensating their CEOs millions of dollars. It's not moral. And they could be doing a great job or not a great job. It's just not moral, in my opinion. I mean, again, I talking about one of the largest medical centers in the United States compensated its CEO $8 million non-taxable dollars. There was articles about it. I have no idea how you make $8 million non-taxable dollars, but they did. And at the same time, when kids can't afford their, you know, have leukemia and the parents are struggling or whatever, you know, they have people in the hospital teaching you how to start GoFundMe pages. You know, how dare you? I mean, literally, I'm a Catholic. I have been violent in my life. I've socked some people in my life. I'm not proud of it. But, I mean, these people deserve to be socked. I mean, how do you know that you're making all of that frickin' money and at the same time you're the head of an institute that are turning away children because they can't afford their medicine? I mean, how do you sleep?
Yeah.
So that's my thing. Because each of us, we want to do good. And it makes us feel good by dropping 50 cents in the bucket of Salvation Army, whatever it is. And I told you at the beginning, I'm not a bright guy. I didn't graduate from high school. And believe me, some of my best friends can tell you, he's not too bright. A lot of people say he's not all there. But my point is that we have a responsibility to help the good people, right? I mean, we also have that responsibility to help the bad people. Jesus said we should, pray for our enemies and, don't, he who throws the first stone. And I live by those words, or I try to live by those words. But if we're going to invest, because our donation is not a donation, that's an investment. And if we're going to make an investment, let's invest in good organizations. And good organizations are run by good people. And let's do our homework.
So where's your organization now? Where's San Rocco sitting? What are we looking at? What does the future look like?
Yeah, we'll be in patients in Italy and in the United States within 6 months. 6 to 8. I mean, you're always running into snags, but let's use 6 months, and we'll be treating patients for $2.3 million less than Bluebird.
And that'll be curing them.
That'll be curing them.
Does someone go to the hospital for this?
Where it takes about 3 months, start to finish. It's a transplant. It's a gene therapy transplant. So they have to do chemotherapy. Okay. They have to go to the hospital, and then they're cured. And right now, for sickle cell disease and thalassemia, there's 2 choices. There's gene editing or gene replacement. We're gene replacement. Bluebird is gene replacement. CRISPR is gene editing. CRISPR is kind of very new. So we use a lentiviral vector, the disabled AIDS virus, to deliver our product. And the lentiviral vectors have been around since 2003, 2004. Very safe. We know a lot about them. CRISPR instead edits by cutting, slicing genes. And in the case of sickle cell disease, they basically disable BCL11A, which is the gene that suppresses fetal hemoglobin. So in sickle cell disease patients using CRISPR, or thalassemic patients using CRISPR, they will basically reproduce or start producing again fetal hemoglobin, and that's how they become asymptomatic of their disease. Having said that, and I'm not going to say mine is better than CRISPR or CRISPR is better than mine, we're not sure. They both have the same results, cure, thank God. CRISPR is about $2.2 million a patient. So ours is $1.4 million less than CRISPR.
And yours is $800,000.
Yes.
How long has this been from start to finish? When I say finish, I mean to being able to treat somebody and cure them.
Well, Rocco was diagnosed in 92, October. He was 2.5 years old. I met Michel Settlein, a scientist, in 2000, and I funded him in 2010. We delivered the world's first batch of gene therapy for sickle cell disease and thalassemia. In 2012, we treated the first patient. It was put on hold for court for, unfortunately, like I said, it was sabotaged, and we were in court off and on for 14 years. And there's some wonderful attorneys, by the way, as well. I know people love to hate attorneys, and I just want to get that in there that one of my attorney, Ken Sussman, I caught my Jew attorney from New York, one of my best friends, one of the greatest guys in the world, it was me and him for years. I mean, I don't know. He lost all of his clients. He did it on contingency. And it was me and him. And we were going up against armies of attorneys, because the people that we were battling had billions and billions of dollars. And it's an incredible story, which is one, if you read the book, I'm an author as well, and I'm not saying I'm a good author, but Flight of the Rondoni was a Wall Street Journal bestseller. And then I wrote another 4 books. Most of the books have to do with rare diseases, by the way. Meaning me and Ken Sussman, my attorney, did literally the impossible. And at the end, he was quitting twice a week. I mean, literally. I can't deal with you. I'm quitting. You're going to get me disbarred, you know. I mean, and so we're doing the film now, and Joe Mantegna is Ken Sussman in the film. And so, in the scenes is, I think the scene with Joe starts that I walk into his office in Manhattan, and I say, I'm jumping off the Empire State Building. And he's looking at his computer and doesn't bat an eye and says, when? And I say, you know what, Ken? If they would, just give us all of the experiments, we're going to be a lot faster. I can't go to the FDA without all the experiments. And he says, well, they claim that they gave you everything you're entitled to. And then he says, you're not going to jump today, are you? I said, no, I don't think, I'm not today. He says, you got to promise me because I might jump with you. If my wife finds out that I signed her name to get the second mortgage on the house, she'll leave me and take my kids, and my life won't be worth much either way. So, you can jump. That's okay because you've done crazier things. But, just let me know first. And that's kind of the Ken Sussman, hero attorney, and Joe Mantegna will be him in the film. We think we're going to call the film Resurrection.
Okay.
But, I'm not decided yet because we're still talking with some companies that will, be distributing it and all of that. But I don't know how we got sidetracked on films or attorneys, but...
On your product, so somebody goes to the hospital, finds out they have sickle cell and they want to be cured.
Right.
Can they go to any hospital and they say, yep, we have San Rocco here, or do they give you a menu like pick from these 3, or how does that work? Do doctors say, I'm signing up for this one, I'm only selling this product, or does the insurance companies get to pick how you're treated? Because there's obviously 3 out there. What does it look like?
Okay, I don't know all the answers, but I can tell you that not all hospitals do gene therapy. For a hospital to be able to treat a patient for gene therapy, they have to be well-equipped, let's put it that way. So if your doctor, you have an issue, your doctor will indicate the hospital closest that does the gene therapy. And then you go through the tests and you make sure you can, do it. Your liver and your heart are functioning well enough to, do everything. And then it takes, gene replacement usually takes no more than 3 months. Gene editing can be a little bit longer because you need more stem cells, I understand. But you'll be in and around the hospital up to 10 months. But both you're asymptomatic and you're all done.
And that's it. There's no more...
That's it. No more transfusions. No more iron chelation. Of course, the damage that you have before you start, before you're cured, some of it can be, you can get back your health. It's a new lease on life. Is that how they say it? A new lease on life.
After this is approved in 6 months or starts curing patients in 6 months, what's next?
Okay, so that's a great question. So we're going to begin curing patients, and I promised a close friend of mine who has an autistic daughter that I would, as soon as humanly possible, jump into that. Now, there's some scientists in England, I'm going to forget their name, that are working on a project. I've talked to them maybe a year and a half ago in the beginning. But I promise that I will switch energy to autism. And the other thing that we're going to dedicate ourselves to, of course, I'm not a scientist, so I can't, I use my limited talents for other things. But the other thing that we want to try to do, and that is try to figure out how these patients can do the stem cell therapy without doing myeloablative therapy, which is chemotherapy, which kills all of their, it makes them sterile, and it's necessary because we need to make the space in their bone marrow, and we need to start from scratch with the new cells that we're giving them. So we have to do that. But we're also going to dedicate energy and resources on trying to figure out how we can treat these patients without bone marrow, without chelating and killing, or I apologize, without killing all of the bone marrow. Maybe we can start cutting back. Maybe we can, give them 50%. Well, but that'll be the next. I think our concentrations will be autism and trying to make transplants easier for patients.
As we close out the conversation here, and I appreciate everything that you've obviously done and gave up to help the world, and I appreciate it because I like helping people too. That's my high. It seems like that's kind of your high, is helping people.
Right. I always say I'm the most selfish guy in the world because the thing that makes me happy is helping people, and so I try to do it whenever I can. So really, I'm just a selfish son of a bitch trying to help people.
I agree with that. As we close it out, is there anything you want to say to the general public, in a short time of,
Yeah. So don't underestimate yourself. Each one of us has incredible gifts. Use those gifts to the best of your ability, and you're going to be able to do things you never thought that you were going to be able to do. We all die. There's nothing wrong with dying. We all have to go. We probably would prefer not to suffer, and we don't want to see the people that we love suffer. But don't underestimate yourself, and use your creativity, because that's what I had to do. I had to use my creativity. And like I said, the world is full of wonderful, incredibly great folks. And I know I've mentioned the names of a couple people that, have done some bad things, but even the bad people, I always think there's no such thing as a bad person. There's just people, good people, that do bad things from time to time. And I as well am guilty of it myself. So my ending quote my ending thing is that, the world is full of a lot of love. And I've been all over, India and Africa and you name it. And it's a wonderful place. And we just, love each other, take care of each other the best that we possibly can. We're not perfect. Remember, the other guy's not perfect. There's no sense in being vindictive and mean and ornery, that doesn't help anyone, least of all yourself, by the way. And that's it. I mean, if anyone, my name is Patrick Girondi, San Rocco Therapeutics. My email is patrick@sanroccotherapeutics.com. If you have a illness in the family, a rare disease, or questions, anything, I'm always willing to help out in my limited way that I can help. And I appreciate you having me on the show, and that I can reach out to all of my brothers and sisters who are listening so that I can do my duty, which is to do the best I can to help someone else.
I appreciate you coming on, and I'm lucky to sit across from someone that literally changed the world. So thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.